Hello, everybody. My name is Pearl Escobar, and my project is on Lucio Costa, who was a Brazilian urban planner. Lucio Costa was a savvy urban planner. He was born in 1902 in France, but from Brazilian parents. He passed away in 1999. Ultimately, it was his clever nature that brought him the success in his career to make him who he is today. Before urban planning, he worked on cultural projects for the government, where he was required to leave his projects quite broad. The great thing about this was that it helped prevent any political bias, so that all of the public would support him, and it wasn't just certain political parties liking him or not liking him. He had a generally good reputation. As a whole, what this did was that it gave him a leg up, since he became so appreciated by all, and it helped him with his career. His cultural projects gave him a door to climb up the ladder into urban planning. This was how he began to plan out Brasilia, the capital of Brazil. So today our research question will be, is modernism an effective strategy to use in urban planning? Before we start, I want you to look at Brasilia. This will be a big topic today, so I want you to have something to picture in your mind as we grind through different ideas. Just drink it in and observe. Pause if you need to, so you can analyze different parts of Costa's work. Brasilia itself is the crown of Costa's accomplishments. And since this city did not evolve over time, it was built to look the way it does. Since Brasilia was built from scratch, we can see how the style of the area reflects Costa's goals. Brasilia is a sort of response to the city beautiful movement with its picturesque appearance. But Costa had more goals than beauty in mind. He planned for the capital to be modern, since modernism can capture not only beauty, but functionality as well. Notice how the garden area has decorative, curving pathways to help enjoy the view, but the roads by the buildings are straight and wide with many lanes. The buildings are separate from the gardens and are more organized than the clustered buildings we see in Los Angeles. Now look in the distance. The land appears flat and more rural compared to the capital. What else do you see? As a result of City Beautiful, Pakistan and Canada moved their capitals. Brazil stands out from the other countries since their capital was built all at once from scratch. In this article by Costa and Lee 2019, this is not Lucio Costa, this is a different person. But from this article, they wanted to study how everything was spaced out in Brasilia. So they divided it into 4 sectors. So the first sector is the residential sector. And they found that the homes were strategically placed away from the water so that the green space by the water can be used as a leisure area. The monumental sector is all along the transverse axis. The social sector is at the intersection of the monumental axis. The bucolic sector is almost all of the green spaces and also a sports complex. So all this is color-coded in figure 3. An interesting tidbit would just be that the people would laugh about it because if you look from the top, the whole area of Brasilia looks like it's shaped like an airplane. And of course, Costa didn't like to hear that, but that's what they would laugh and say the place, oh, it's the airplane, and it would really upset Mr. Costa. The last image that we looked at was from 1957, but this one now that we're going to look at is from 2015. So they zoom out so you can see a wider area. And as you can see, if you look to the legend on the side with the population density, Brasilia doesn't have a very high population compared to everywhere around it, where slowly the density is getting bigger and bigger the farther away you get from Brasilia. And it does make sense because if you look at the last figure we looked at, there's only a limited amount of homes. It's not a very urbanized space. There's a lot of green space. So there's not a whole lot of space for people to live. Logically, it makes sense that their density is lower. This article goes over more of the culture and the history of what was going on in the time period when Costa was living. Before, in general, not just in Brazil, the middle class wasn't really a thing. There was the rich and there was the poor. So in this time, Brazil is starting to have a new middle class. It's growing and it's growing, and the middle class is becoming this large class of people. And the middle class frowned on these old aristocratic families and their lifestyle, because their lifestyle was the epitome of old fashioned. So the middle class wanted the opposite of that. They were seeking a modernized, new urban life. They wanted a nice urban place to live, but they also wanted a new urban, modern lifestyle with new ideas and ways of being that were different than before. The problem with that is that people argued against the modernism, saying that the country's true culture did not lie in being modern, and that Brazil's true identity and culture, their roots, lie in nature and agriculture because they are so rich in that over there. So there's this battle of modern versus rural. And that is the reason why that Brasilia is such a unique place, why it incorporates so much green space, but also it does have an urban feel to it, that Costa had to cater to this modern middle class and also the more traditional people who preferred nature. And this is not only in Brasilia, but it is seen in other works that Costa has. So if you look at this image, figure 1, Lucio Costa designed this house. Now if you look, there's a porch in the back with stairs. And he made a point for these homes for them to have an outside section for anybody to go in, and for the house to also have a private section that was just for the family. And this is the same concept of him having to cater towards opposing sides so that he can make everybody happy. So this home is a nice happy medium from sharing your home with everyone and also having a place for yourself. This next study was done in the University of Brasilia. Perfect. They have a more of a scientific style study, but it is interesting to say, what are the effects of what's going on with this modernism and this new urban style? They found out that the areas in Brasilia that had more concrete and less greenery can cause heat islands. A heat island is a little space that has an excessive heat. Now, if you look at this map that has the temperatures recorded, all those areas in red is the areas that are in between. Like these are your walkways. That is where the concrete is. Now, if you look more towards the center of this colorful area, there's these two rectangular shapes. Those are where the buildings are. So they're a bit cooler. And if you look to the far left, there's a blob shaped with some yellowish color. That is the residential area. And the residential area is more likely to have a little bit of green space and plants compared to the rest of the city. And of course, the water and the lakes are going to have the coolest temperatures. But it is something worth noting that what if every city were like Brasilia? That would be a lot of heat islands everywhere, especially in places like the US where we're an extremely urban place, especially here in Los Angeles. If there's too many heat islands, that can also be contributing to the global warming we have and climate change. Maybe it seems like not a big deal because this is just one city, Brasilia. But if you multiply this city everywhere around the world, that's when it can cause a big and negative change in the environment. So, in the beginning, we had that question: is modernism an effective strategy to use in urban planning? And it seems to be a good thing to do. People love this city. It's beautiful, it looks dreamlike, it's a nice, clean space. But I don't want to say, yes, urbanization is good, but I also don't want to say, no, it's bad. I believe that they have their pros and cons, and it's a bittersweet situation. I'm a 50-50 person. It can go either way. So for the pros, if you look at the maps from earlier, you see that the homes are strategically located away from the water so that the green space is by the water for everyone to enjoy. And I believe that since the homes are away from the water, that can help to aid overfishing. So that the fish populations and the ocean in that area must be a very healthy area. It's not being overfished. I'm sure that the different species must be flourishing there. I also found that this city was quite spacious. There's plenty of room in the center, as you can see, lots of green space. Even the buildings are not too overcramped. They have a nice space in between. The streets have room. This is not your average cramped city. And it does look like a pleasant place to live. Also, it's not too large. It's not too populated. And it looks like a nice place to raise a family. It's safe. It's clean. There's green space. You have the benefits of both worlds. You have the city here, and you also have green space. You have the best of everything. But on the other hand, there is no agricultural space, only grass and a few occasional trees. So if every city were to be like this one, then that would mean a lot of people starving. There's not enough food around. And if we do have food, that means it's going to be imported to the city, which means that there's going to be more gas emissions. I believe to improve a city like this, they would need to be a little more self-sustainable, to start some farms, maybe reserve a little space for that. Another concern I had was the heat islands. There is a lot of concrete. There's a lot of streets here, especially the concrete in between buildings and whatnot. That can cause heat islands. And over time, if this kind of thing spreads from city to city, that can affect the rest of the environment. Another concern I have is that there isn't very much housing space. There is housing space, but not a lot to support a big population. And even earlier we saw that their population density is not very high. It's actually quite low compared to the space around them. So it must be very hard to get to live in a place like that, although it's very attractive. So I view modernization to be a bittersweet thing, and Lucille did a good job. And I think that he really did make a change in history by introducing this new style, and his work is being remembered, and he deserves it. He earned it. Here are my works cited. Thank you so much for your time and for listening.